People of Reddit, what's your I don't want you as a friend anymore moments when you realize that someone is not a good friend towards you? I was in middle school. I had about $20 a month as an allowance from my parents. My friends and I went to the movies one day, and on the way there my friend at the time asked to borrow a bus ticket that was $2.50. I lent it to her, no questions asked. On the way back, she asked again, and I gave it to her again. On the bus, she was talking to another friend of ours, and giggling and looking towards me. I was confused and asked them what she was giggling about. My other friend later told me that she had bus tickets all along and just wanted freebies from me. The worst part was that she laughed at me because I was kind to her. I was so mad. When I went home, my 12-year-old ass slayed that bitch on MSN and never talked to her again after that. When she was giving me a ride back from a lunch we had just had, we saw an ex of mine casually strolling down the sidewalk. She honked and waved and asked if I would mind getting let off a few blocks short of my apartment so she could go back and pick him up and chat. I was a little annoyed, but said sure, just drop me at the next street. She then started talking about how excited she was to see him after all these years. It had been about 6 years since the ex and I dated, and how it was perfect timing because she had just broken up with her husband and some random sex was just the thing to cheer her up. I asked why specifically she wanted to have sex with him, and she went on about this move he did that was great, taught him that but in ways. I asked when she had slept with him, and she tells me about this time when him and I were fighting. She totally thought it was okay. I just looked at her and said nothing. She said it's okay you guys were fighting. I didn't think you would mind. Okay. I got out of the car, walked about 10 minutes to my apartment in a stupor, and when I was home I realized my ex and I had only ever had one big fight. A fight she started by suggesting to him I was cheating with an ex of mine. I wasn't. So all those years later I realized she started a fight between us so she could sleep with my boyfriend. What the actual fuck? I never returned any of her calls and just cut her out of my life. I see her from time to time, and I'm cordial but not friendly. She was one of my best friends since I was a teenager. I knew she was fickle, but at that moment I realized she was backstabbing bitch on top of it. Probably the day I introduced my at the time girlfriend to my friends, and one of them instantaneously started chatting her up and asked for her number. It wasn't the first time he had done it either, as he had done it to a few other guys before. The girl I was seeing at the time slapped him a good one, called him a cunt, and he fucked off. We never saw him again after that, as we told him he was a prick and we couldn't be dealing with him anymore. This was 10 years ago now, when we were all 20 over 21. I had a friend who I thought enjoyed my company and always had a great time hanging out. But it was hard to get him to hang out, and he'd generally only do it when it was himself asking to do it. Seemed impossible to get him to commit to plans of any kind. We didn't hang out for probably 2 years until we random hung out again. He talked about wanting to do it again the following week, which I took seriously. Then cancelled 2 weeks in a row last minute, and by that I mean that he never mentioned it again, and when I'd bring it up, when the time came, he'd have some excuse. It had hit me before that he probably didn't like seeing me much, but I really accepted it at that point. I reflected on how many times I was blown off, that I realized that I liked his company more than he liked mine, and decided that it was best to unofficially end the friendship. There was no drama or betrayal in this story. I just don't want to be that person that people put up with to be nice. I'd rather be alone. I never technically cut ties, as there's no need to. I've done the same with most family members. You just don't reach out to them, and they quickly forget that you exist. When I was about 10 years old, the neighbor kid and I were playing King of the Castle or something on another neighbor's huge and honestly quite badass swing set. The thing was like 3 stories high. No way anyone would build something like that for kids nowadays. Anyway, we got into some kind of silly disagreement. Cannot for the life of me remember what it was about, but he was on top of the play structure and I was on the ground. I was pretending to threaten him with this board and he reached into the back of his pants and threw something at me. I held the board up in front of my face to block whatever was coming and heard the thump of something soft and wet. I turned the board over and saw that my friend had just threw a piece of his own shit at me. He was cackling away on top of the tower and I just dropped the board and walked home. The next day he rang the doorbell to see if I could come play, and I told him no. I said I rather watch cartoons. I don't think I ever played with him again. There was this guy at work that I become friends with. We weren't super close to each other necessarily, but we hung out with the same group of friends. One day, he asked me if he could borrow $60 so he could buy a new phone. I was like, yay, okay. Never saw that $60 again. This was when I became a little weary of him. We went with said group of friends to Vegas, and he tried to act all alpha in the group despite having to have some of his meals paid for him by others because he left his wallet in the room. He'd pull the same routine every now and then would go to the movies or to a restaurant. Eventually, the chick he was living with, supposedly his GF, kicks him out of the house. At the time, we suspect that she was being a typical crazy GF and just kicking him out for attention. He then asked to move in with one of my other friends. They're living together for about 6 to 7 months and he didn't pay his share of the rent for maybe 3 of those months. On months he did pay, he was short, so my friend had to pay for his share and whatever penalties that accrued from being late due to having to scrounge up the money. Eventually, the lease is up. His name wasn't on it, he was just crashing, and this motherfucker has the audacity to not pay his rent payment. Instead, he goes to Vegas for his birthday with some other friends who pay for his weekend. This is a type of leech motherfucking type of person I have absolutely no respect for. At this point, I couldn't get past all the bullshit he has been pulling and would just snap at him whenever he tried to sound cool or whatever. It all came to a head on New Year's Eve this year. I got super drunk and my patience was at an all-time low. He made one remark about me not being able to hang alcohol wise, and this was when I called him out on all his shit and essentially severed the relationship. Some of my friends still hang out with him, telling me to just suck it up and leave it in the past, but I don't think I'll ever be able to look beyond all the previous bullshit. People like that will always be toxic to me. Story I've told before, my best mate in high school. Top bloke, shirt off yaback kinda fella. We experienced everything together, all the pre and post pubescent stuff. First fuck around with illegal stuff, drugs, drinks, you name it. At the time both of us were heavily involved in trafficking, weed through our respective schools, and due to my size I was a debt collector of sorts for kids who had stiffed the local dealers. Then through an unfortunate series of events, I cleaned myself up and dropped anything that wasn't legal. Doubt though, he was having too much fun doing his thing. We still caught up as often, but this time I was just on the piss, not shooting deer or smoking dope. He would always ask, I would always decline. This pissed Doug off to the point he cut contact with me one day, really abruptly. Didn't feel the need to pursue a reason. Fast forward about 10 years, Ma rings me, tells me that Doug had rocked up at my folks asking to catch up and bury the hatchet as he was clean. So she gave him my address, and he was coming over. The missus didn't know about Doug, and was fast asleep anyway, so I just left the door open a crack, so I could hear his car pull up. Had a real bad feel in it though, to the point where I grabbed the pacifier, a length of thick regime I'd fashioned into a cudgel from my high school woodwork days, that I usually keep near the door, and slid it hidden from sight near the couch. Still don't know why. Moments later, hear a car pull up. I go outside to meet him, and could immediately tell something was up. Firstly, Doug was fucking flying, pupils like 5-cent pieces. So much for being clean. Second, instead of his crappy Holden we used to bomb around brought in, he was driving some old Volvo. Now I know his family was the same as mine, pretty much boggin, welfare, and he had Holden lovers, so it struck as odd as hell. We used to nick a few cars for insurance jobs back in the day too. Damn, I haven't thought about that in years. Anyway, after an awkward handshake, I motion him around the back to the shed, basically my man cave. Hit the lights, grab a beer and toss one over to him. Fuck me, he had a rough time. Thin as a whip now, couple of dodgy neck and facial tats. He was pretty fidgety, I guess from the gear he was obviously on. He was rambling about his stint inside, not surprising, how his family had all moved back up north, and how he was clean now. I stopped him there and called him out. Basically said bullshit, can't remember exactly what I said. He insisted it was from cold medicine or something. PFFT. The whole time he was looking around the shed, but only at certain things. Expensive things. Power tools. Gym kit. My gun safe in particular. I didn't like where this was going, so told him we can catch up later on the week or something. I gotta go to bed. He was cool with that, smiled, patted me on the back, and jumped back in his car after I walked him out. I stick me head in to say see ya, checked the ignition. Of course there was no key. Couple of days later, I note the gun safe had pry marks on the paint. Now this fucker is locked up good solid steel, anchored to the concrete. It ain't opening unless I open it. Aussie law is pretty hardcore with that shit. Call up the cops, tell them what's happened. They come around and have a squiz. I'll let them know I'm pretty sure I know who tried to open it. Gave them dog's full name, left it at that. Haven't heard from the bloke in near 15 years. Frankly don't care if I do. As an update to this, he died last year, about 6 people from memory, including myself, at his funeral. Burnt a lot of bridges, apparently. I have this friend who's pretty good at making friends. In fact she has many. She's this bubbly, happy person. When you get to know her, though, you realize she's not exactly the most charming person ever. A few things I don't like about her. She uses the fact that she bought me a drink a while back as leverage to get me to do shit for her. She threatens me with rape whenever I disagree with her about something. I'm a guy, and she says she'll send her gay friends after me to rape me. She constantly talks shit about other people from her friend circle when they're not around, and then be all smiles and hugs when they are. One time, she forgot her school ID and she yelled at the security guard for not letting her in. She was then complaining about how shitty our university's system was. She made fun of the victims of a recent terrorist attack on one part of our country. She turns a blind eye to anything that doesn't directly affect her. I don't want anyone like that to be my friend. When I realized my best friend from high school only kept me around as the ugly friend. I was a bit of an ugly duckling in school. Kinda overweight, I have thick curly hair, and hadn't figured out how to get it to behave. I got in college, and lost the weight, figured how to do my hair and makeup. My best friend suddenly started being really mean. Saying shit like I liked you better when you were fat, or why are you trying so hard? Apostrophe. Turns out she had an eating disorder and my weight loss was triggering her. Not to sound heartless, but having an eating disorder doesn't give you a free pass to bully your friends and make them feel bad for trying to better themselves. We aren't friends anymore. My life has been much better without that kind of toxic behavior. Was friends with this kid in middle school. We didn't talk once while in high school because he moved to another county. I moved to another state. We moved on. In 2015 he hits me up on Facebook and immediately asked me for money and even tried to get me involved into what I'm sure was a Ponzi scheme. Blocked him after the 5th time he asked me for money. The thing is, had he even attempted to converse with me, I maybe would've done it. Our Facebook chat consists of me, hey, me 6 months later, dude, me 2 years later, hey, him a year later starts nagging for money. Coming back from my kitchen and announcing they had fixed the thermostat in my fridge for me. Oh really? I hadn't noticed anything wrong with it. Where did you study refrigerator maintenance? I didn't. What was the setting before you changed it? I don't remember. Within a week everything in the fridge had rotted. That person was never invited over again. And adding up a few other things that had been off, I dropped the friendship. When she told my entire Catholic school that I didn't know who the father of my baby was because I have been such a whore. I was 15 and I was in an abusive relationship. My boyfriend also hears the rumor she started and he beat me. When my friend saw what happened she said I deserved it. I should have ended the friendship years ago, but it took 7 years for me to finally grow a pair and do it. She just kept going off on me and accusing me of shit we both knew I didn't do, would talk shit about me and blame me for any problems we had while playing the victim like she never contributed to our arguments and wanted to be my best friend only when she and this other girl weren't friends. A few months ago I finally just cut her off after her harassing me all day about some shit talking I didn't do and calling me a bitch and a toxic person, and then later in the same day trying to talk to me like nothing happened because it was actually someone else that spread the rumor. Lol, my bad. Definitely realizing they cared more what people thought of them than they cared about my well-being. X. At a bar. Had just ended a long-term relationship, was looking forward to a pub night with a friend. He invites his coworkers, one of whom, M, continuously negs me all night, the worst of which, that I heard, was him theatrically looking me, F, up and down, and saying to my friend, that he should go for an upgrade once we get inside. Friend did not even bat an eye, let alone stand up for me, so I walked off into the night away from their bullshit, and never spoke to them again. My 2 years old was diagnosed with cancer, and had 10% chance of survival. His godparent never bothered to visit in hospital or at home. I told this person that, if they were uncomfortable seeing my child this way, we could still meet up for coffee as I needed a friendly distraction. This person told me they needed to be selfish, because they just broke off a relationship. We were friends for 21 years. 2 years old is now 9 years old and cancer free. I was friends with this girl, we were pretty good friends. Then she accused me of putting photos of her up on 4chan labeling her a slut or something. I had no clue what 4chan was, and told her I wouldn't do anything like that to anyone. She accursed me again. I said don't ever speak to me again, blocked her number /MSN/Facebook. Never spoke to her again. As she was complaining about having to make awkward small talk with a classmate of ours that rode the same bus as her, I confessed that I had a crush on him. A few weeks later, he was one of her best friends and her life felt empty when he went on a trip. She also said that she deserved better than everyone else in our class. She was okay with me, my crush and her actual best friend getting better grades than her, but she was pissed when one of my other friends got 100% on an exam and she didn't. Apparently my friend didn't deserve a good grade, even though she answered all the questions correctly. And she would also point at random people and talk loudly about how they wore fake designer clothes/bags.